Hi there everyone! Today I'm going to be telling you all about all of the books that were my favorite in the year of 2017. So I'm just going to be telling y'all all of my 5-star reads, and I think those could be labeled as my favorites. I couldn't really pick between these books to narrow it down to a shorter list, so I'm just going to list all of my 5-star reads. These are in no particular order, and funny enough, there are actually 17 5-star rated reads that I read this year that were not rereads for me. So here are my top 17 books that I read in the year of 2017. First, let's talk about Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. So I read this book last month and absolutely fell in love with it. I have yet to finish the rest of the series, but I hope to soon. And if you did not know what this book is about, we have our main character, Karou. She is basically raised by these people that aren't people. They're half animal, half human, or half animal, half part other animal, and she basically works for them as well as they're her family figures. But then one day these mysterious handprints appear on the secret door that she has to go to get through to her family's house, and these appear all over the world, and mysterious angels are involved that might become love interests, and she's just like an amazing character. She literally has blue hair growing out of her head, and she has tattoos all over her body and tattoos of eyes on her palms. It's just such a unique story that I'm absolutely in love with. It's a fantasy read set in like a modern day place, but then there are also like fantastical places set in this book. I don't really know how to describe this book. I really don't know how other people could describe this book. It's so good. I have heard nothing but good things about this entire series, and I hear that the other books just get better and better as they go on, so I can't wait to get to the next ones. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book. Next is Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. So I read this at the very beginning of 2017. It was actually back to back with Six of Crows, and Six of Crows was my last read of 2017, so I read them back to back. I absolutely love this duology. Before I read this, I heard nothing but good things. The Grisha universe is absolutely fantastic from what I've read from these two books. I haven't read the Grisha trilogy yet. I have the first book, but I have not read it yet. This book series is basically about these misfits, I kind of want to say, but they're like badass misfits. They don't really fit in anywhere else or with anyone else except for each other, and they come together to perform this heist, and it like isn't what you think though, and it's so good, and I could not recommend this series enough, and I absolutely adored this book. It made me laugh, and of course there were times it made me cry, and yeah, I wish there were more to this series, but there's not. I just need to go read the Grisha books. The next 5-star rated book that I read this year is The Princess Saves Herself, and this one by Amanda Lovelace. It's a poetry book, and it's just filled with poems that I just related to on such a deep level, and there's nothing else I could really say about it. I have this book in college with me, so I don't have it with me physically right now. So yeah, I would read you a poem or something if I had the book, but I don't. So it's really good. Please go out and read it if you love poetry. Next, I have Emma by Jane Austen. I read this earlier in the year for my English literature class for my senior year of high school, and I absolutely loved it. I love anything by Jane Austen. She is one of my all-time favorite authors. If you love the movie Clueless, that's set in the 90s, that movie is based off of Emma. It's really, really cute. I love it. This is set in 19th century England, and there's this woman who is labeled as kind of like the town matchmaker, and she helps people basically find husbands and find wives. Not as like a job, that's not her job. She just likes to meddle in people's love lives, and she evidently might want to find love herself, and so this story is just about her and basically all of her little shenanigans that she gets into because of her setting people up. It's so adorable and I love it, and Jane Austen is fantastic, so please go out and read this book. So I have to talk about A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. This is obviously on this list. Sarah J. Maas is my goddess. I love her so much. If you do not know what the A Court of Thorns and Roses series is, what are you doing with your life? Please go out and read it. I will say, if you were not a fan of Throne of Glass, you will like this series. I know a lot of people out there, especially on BookTube, who didn't like Throne of Glass, but they gave A Court of Thorns and Roses a chance and ended up loving it. And the first book is probably the worst out of all of them, but it's still really good. But people say, oh, I didn't really like A Court of Thorns and Roses, but then you read A Court of Mist and Fury and then everything gets better because it's the best book ever. Duh. But basically the third one here is just the completion of Feyre and Rhys's story and their whole gang with the inner circle, and it wrecked me. I cried, I laughed, I cried, let's just say I cried a lot. I read this around finals time and my mom yelled at me many times for not studying for finals, but it's okay because I graduated high school. It's fine, we're fine. My next 5-star read is The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. So I read the entire Raven Cycle Quartet this year, and I listened to all of them on audiobook, so I don't have the physical book with me. And I really enjoyed this series. I gave the rest of the book series a 4 out of 5 stars, but the last one a 5, just because I thought it was a perfect wrap-up of this story. To be honest, I don't really remember all that much that happened, just because I think I read them way too fast or listened to them way too fast, and I don't really remember all that much. But the first book I know is about this girl named Blue Sargent and her family are psychics, and she isn't a psychic, but she is kind of like the energy power for a psychic. When she's in a room with a psychic's powers become greater. She's kind of like their battery increases their psychic abilities. There's this boy named Gansey, and he has a bunch of friends, and they're trying to find something. It's really cool and mysterious, and I loved it. It has this fantastical element to it that I really, really liked, and Maggie Stiefvater's writing style is absolutely fantastic. So I totally recommend this series. The Raven King was the conclusion to this series, and I absolutely loved it and wish there were more in the series. Next, I have The Winner's Kiss by Marie Rutowski. This is the third book in the Winner's Trilogy by Marie Rutowski, and this is, the conclusion and third book. I read this series, all 3 in 3 days. I was so obsessed with them. I really, really loved these books, but I gave the last one the 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't give the first or second one just because the first 2 left something little lacking here and there, and then this one I just thought wrapped everything up in a perfect little bow for me. I loved it. But I'll give you the synopsis of the first book if you want to go out and read the whole series. So the first book is about this woman named Kestrel, and she's the daughter to the general of these people, and one day she ends up buying a slave and things ensue from there. It's just about empowerment, and there's a bunch of political intrigue in this book if you're into that, and I absolutely loved it. And the story's just about Kestrel and her trying to realize if her society is correct in owning these slaves and keeping them there, and it's just a fantastic book, and I don't know, I loved it. Next, I have 5 Ways to Fall by K.A. Tucker. So this is a romance novel that I found in the adult romance section at my Barnes & Noble, and I just picked it up because I was really in the mood this summer to read a lot of romance books, and that just sparked more and more throughout the year. I read so many romance books this year, but this one is probably my favorite out of all of them, and this is a contemporary, no fantastical elements to it. It's basically about this girl named Rhys, and she ends up going on vacation to Cancun, or some part of Mexico, and she ends up meeting this guy there, and she almost has a one-night stand with him, but then something happens and she doesn't. But turns out after her little vacation, she's supposed to start a job at her uncle's law firm, and turns out that the guy she almost had a one-night stand with works there also. So she has to deal with that, and I absolutely love these 2 characters together, and there's the angst, if you like angst. Also, mature content, so don't read this book if you don't like mature content, just saying. But I totally recommend this book if you're a big romance person. Stevenson. I believe this is a series though, which I didn't know. It's kind of like a companion series, but this is the last one in the companion series, which I didn't know about. But you don't need to read them in order or read them to get or understand this book at all. If this sparks your interest, please go out and read it. I absolutely loved it. Next, I have Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. So I had to read this book going into freshman year of college. It was kind of like our required year read for the campus as a whole. Basically, this book is just about Bryan Stevenson's life as a defense lawyer, and he goes to help young or old, I guess any age, but a bunch of these stories about young black men who are put on death row, and he just tells so many heartbreaking stories about them, and it was just really good. It left a large impact on me. It just opened my eyes to putting people on death row and trying to get the whole story from someone instead of just locking them away and telling them that they're gonna die. They should get all their ducks in a row and understand what's going on in someone's life, and I don't know, just listen. And I really enjoyed this, and I really recommend this book. I have to next talk about The Immortal Life of Henrietta by Rebecca Skloot. I have talked about this a bunch of my channel recently, and it is because it is such a good book. I had to read this for my biology class last semester in college, and I absolutely loved it. It's about this woman named Henrietta Lacks who, in the 50s or 40s, her cells were extracted from her cervical cancer, and they became the first immortal line of human cells to live outside of a human body. And that helped cure so many diseases, one being polio, and just help find so many cures to so many things. And this story is basically about the scientific discovery of that, as well as her family as a whole, who received no compensation for this amazing scientific discovery. And it's so unfortunate, and I just loved learning about her family and what happened to her, and it really left such a big impact on me, and I totally, again, recommend this book. Next, I have The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. So this is a for sure romance novel. It is a fantasy romance novel, which I absolutely loved. It has fantastical elements to it. I listened to this on audiobook. If you wanted to listen to it, the audiobook I believe is fantastic, but it is 20 hours long if you're into that. Basically, it's about this woman who kind of gets in an arranged marriage with the Winter King, and he is kind of labeled as like a really big evil bad guy, and she has to basically deal with being his wife, and it's just so good because she also like learns about her powers. Like she has storm powers and can start storms, and I love it because it's not just about her being in a marriage with this guy, it's about her discovering herself as well as learning about the place that she lives in now and learning the culture, and it's so good. It's so good. I also read the second book in the series this year. Unfortunately, it did not rate a 5-star for me, more of a 4, just because there is content in that book that I don't really approve of. But this book, yes, does have mature content, so if you're not into that, don't read it. But if you are, I loved it. I loved it a lot, so please go read it or listen to it. Next, I have Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. So I absolutely loved this book. John Green's new book is absolutely fantastic. It's about this girl who has OCD, and it's basically her story trying to deal with it, as well as maybe like find a missing billionaire for a reward and dealing with her best friend and an old love interest and back in the day. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful, and John Green's writing style never ceases to amaze me. His writing style just keeps getting better and better after every book, and I just loved it, and she just related to me on such a deep level, and I don't know what else to say except I loved this book and I need more of it. Next is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. Yes, another Sarah J. Maas book appeared on this list. This is probably my new favorite book in the Throne of Glass series. I absolutely loved it. It was gorgeous. It was amazing. The story takes place during Empire of Storms. I can't really say all that much about it because it is deep into the series by now and I don't want to spoil anything for you, but it tells the story of Chaol during Empire of Storms. So Selena is not in this book. I grew to love Chaol again, and I recommend everyone out there go and do that as well. I have so many people out there who are so resistant to reading this book because the main protagonist from the other books is not in this book. And you know what? I loved it. I loved it a lot, and I grew to love him so much more, as well as other characters, and I met my new favorite character in this book series in this book. So if you want to meet her, go read this book. It is so good, and yeah, we just deal with so many new things. We are introduced to a whole entire new continent, a new culture, new people, and I just fell in love with all of it. Next is Queens of Geek by Jen Wild, and I absolutely loved this book. It was so cute. I know this book has been getting mixed reviews, but you know what? I gave it a 5-star because I personally had such a fun time and I totally enjoyed reading this book. Basically, it's about these 3 friends going to a convention center together, basically like a Comic-Con, but it's called SuperCon, and one of the main character girls, she is a famous YouTuber, and she's also upcoming in a famous zombie film, and she recently just broke up with her co-star boyfriend, but when she gets to the con, like, her all-time favorite crush who's on YouTube is there, and the crush may not even be one-sided, as it turns out. And then the other main character has a crush on the guy main character, and she is just me. She's literally me. I absolutely just adored this book, and it's just so cute, and I love what happens in the book, and there's great diversity in this book. I love it, and please go read it because it's awesome. Next, I have Kashmir by Temple West, and this is the 2nd book in the Velvet trilogy, and I read Velvet maybe last year or the year before. I don't remember when Velvet came out, but I read it right when it came out. If you love vampires, go read this book. This guy's a vampire. Basically, the first book is about this girl named Caitlin, and she's very much into design, and she has to go live with her aunt and uncle because unfortunately her family has all passed away, and living next door to her aunt and uncle's house is this giant mansion, and turns out there's a vampire who lives there, and he may have to become her bodyguard because something happens. And this book is just a continuation of that story, and I love this couple, and I can't get enough of them, and I just smile thinking about it, and yeah, I'm absolutely obsessed with the series, and I can't wait for the next one to come out. Next is Eidolon by Grace Draven. So I listened to this on audiobook this year. I don't know if it came out this year. It might have come out this year, but the audiobook did come out this year. But this is the 2nd book in the Radiance. I don't know if it's called the Radiance series. It's called something. I don't know the name of the series because there's only 2 books out right now, so I don't know the name of it. Let's just call it the Radiance series because the first book is called Radiance, and this is a fantasy romance novel series, and I'm absolutely in love with it. In the first book, that is about our main character named Ildiko, and she gets in an arranged marriage with a man named Rishan, but he's not a normal man. He is what they call the Kai, and they are gray-skinned creatures with sharp teeth and yellow eyes, but they do act like men and they speak like men. They are just a different species of man, and basically they have to be married for political reasons, and it's them growing together and falling for each other, and it's so cute. And this is the 2nd book, and it was just as good as the first book. I love it so much. I love it. The audiobook is fantastic, the narrator is fantastic, and I could not recommend this series more. And lastly, I have to talk about Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. Oh my gosh, this book was so good. It was so good. Oh my god. I could not talk about this book enough. If you did not know what this book is about, we have our main character, and she is basically the secret author for an online web comic series called Monstrous Sea, and she basically draws comics for them and tells a story about it, and it's fantastic. Then one day this guy comes to her school and turns out he is the biggest fan for this series, and she basically has to deal with connecting with him as well as maybe trying to keep her secret or maybe telling him her secret. But she's a very introverted person and her only friends are online, which her parents don't understand. It's perfect if you're into fandom. This is a giant fandom loving book, and I love fandom loving books, so I could not get enough. It's just perfect. I connected to it so much. Go read this book. So those are all my favorite books that I read this year, not including rereads, by the way. I hope you all enjoyed. Sorry if this video was kind of long. Didn't mean for that to happen, but I tried to keep it short and sweet for the synopses. Thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know down below if you have any questions about any of these books. I would love to answer them. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe down below if you want to see more from me. And yeah, thank you all for watching. And I'll see y'all soon with a new video. Bye.